The stories continue to surprise. They continue to entice. That the tone shifts and is fluid. Sometimes the show is funny. Sometimes it's very intense. Sometimes it's very emotional. Sometimes it's ruthless, and sometimes it's horrific. And sometimes it's all of that sort of mixed up together into one thing. I think it also is that the show has never had a real paradigm. You know, there's never been there's small patterns within the chaos. But I mean, you know, we just, 2 years ago, or I don't know how long ago, we did, half a season where Red was in jail and in court, you know, and it just is, the show changes a lot. What keeps the show interesting for me, and if the show is interesting for me, you know, I hope that it's interesting for others. And we've certainly had an incredibly faithful and loyal and lovely audience that it keeps coming back to watch. I can't speak to now, but, you know, television has been evolving and changing over the years since our show started. And I think our show started, at least, as sort of something that was unique, at least for broadcast television, you know. It's a strange show, you know. It's a strange marriage of this serialized sort of mythology and procedural, and there's a bunch of different worlds within the show itself. You know, there's Reddington and his world, and then there's the world of the FBI, and other paths cross, and there certainly are intersections, but to a great degree, it gives the audience a broad spectrum to play along with, you know. The relationship between Reddington and Elizabeth Keene has changed and been so mercurial, you know, throughout the history of the show. And there have been so many hills and valleys, and then moments of calm between them. And then they've been driven apart and then back together and so on. There's no question that in this season there's been a lot of shifts depending on who her allegiances have been with, and that has played out this season a lot. But, you know, like many things on our show, a lot is driven by misinterpretation. Not only for the characters, but sometimes for our audience. We've had arcs in our show that sometimes have gone that have lengthy sort of arc in the show, story arc in a show where it's driven by the fact that someone felt they knew about something, they were simply wrong about it. Or they just had a misunderstanding about, you know. This season really has a concentration of sort of misinterpretation. And it certainly comes crashing into a climax, you know, due to that. You know, in the episode that we did about Glenn's death, which we did in response to Clark's death, there was a speech. There were a couple of speeches that were in that, but there was a speech at the end of it that Reddington gave. And A lot of what was in that speech was really about, the lines became blurry between Glenn and Clark. Clark was one of people's favorite characters on our show. And he brought that character to the show, really. I mean, it was on the page, but who he really was and what he could bring to the show was not on the page. It was what Glenn brought to it, what Clark brought to it. And irreplaceable. He was a very, very special character to the show, and Clark made that character live. And he's the only character in the entire show who ever really got under Reddington's skin, ever. He could push buttons like no one else has ever in the entire show. It's really the only times that you would see Reddington really get angry was in dealing with Glenn. Now, that did not mirror our relationship, Clark's and my relationship, that part of it. But Clark brought that. I mean, he just brought that for that character. She's so lovely. We met her in person for the first time on that episode. I think that was the first time. Yes, I think it was. In the episode about Glenn's death, we met his mother, and everybody just thought she was so fantastic. And I did one scene with her and called up, we had several in the episode, but I did the first scene with her, and I called up the writers and I said, we have got to find a way to bring Glenn's mother into the show with us. And so Glenn lives on. Well, she didn't make it very difficult for him at all. I mean, she made it quite easy. She went out of her way to make it easy.